Great. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Mornings with Marit. Today, I'm super excited about this presentation with Nicole, who I'll introduce with here shortly. As many of you know, I'm a huge fan of Kolbe and have been around Kolbe for 16 or 17 years now, which seems very, very long. But it's fun to actually now take a twist on this and think about it with kids' perspective, not just about leadership and in your agencies. So today's obviously called the Survival Guide for Parents, Taking the Struggle Out of the Semester. So we'll just move forward here, Nicole, quickly. I know you're going to help me move through the slides. And if you haven't joined us on our Facebook page, please do. That'll be great. It's a good way for us to entertain with each other, talk to each other, ask questions, and a lot of times that's where some of the ideas for these programs happen as well. So I hope you'll join us there. If you haven't, just go on the Facebook page and ask to join the team, and we'll do that. So with that said, I'm going to introduce Nicole Loucks today. She's with an organization called Dynamynd, which is actually a company with Colby. And so they focus specifically on kids and a lot of the R&D work that Colby does that goes into production later on. So Nicole's been with Dynamynd for about 4 years now. She's their COO. She actually was a high school teacher prior to that. And she also does consulting with schools and kids. So I think you're going to like her take on things. And she's going to bring us a lot of good advice as parents, how to deal with your kids, whether they're virtual or at home or at school, and just some different techniques to maybe give them a better environment that's a little healthier going into next. So Nicole, why don't you go ahead and say hi and give us a little bit of background on you, and we'll talk about Colby's with us too.
Hi, Marit. Thanks so much for having me on this morning. As she said, have been with Dynamynd for about 4 years now. Previously, I was a high school chemistry teacher. I'm also a parent of 2 young kiddos. So I can totally understand what you guys are all going through right now from both the educator perspective and the parent perspective, and trying to figure out how we're going to navigate through this crazy time we're going through, especially this semester where we're sort of online, sort of in person, and how we can help our kids be really successful.
Great. I'm also going to introduce Matt. So you're wondering why there's a guy sitting there and he's not going to talk very much. But Matt's our communications director at IIT, and he's actually going to share his own personal stories with his son doing the student aptitude quiz and how that's helped him and his son sort of work through maneuvering through the unknowns and how to make him feel more comfortable. So Matt, you can say hi to everybody too.
Hello, everybody. Like Marit said, I have a 11-year-old son, so he's going to be going into middle school, so a big transition, and it's, of course, very weird with everything that's happening right now. I also have a 3-year-old. He was too young to take this, but I'll probably make him take it when he's a little older. But yeah, I look forward to talking with everybody.
Great.
Well, we have a solution for you, Matt.
Stay
All right.
Stay tuned. So the other thing that's fun about Matt, just so you guys know, all the webinars we do at IIT, Matt's usually the guy behind it, making sure that it works. And he'll be paying attention to the chat box today and helping us with any questions you might have. So we want to make sure that you have an opportunity to check in with us. And this will also be recorded. So this will be available on demand. I know there's going to be some of you that are going to be listening to this and then say, gee, I wish so-and-so had heard this, or how do I make sure somebody has the resources later? And so we will make sure we send out the link later today and put it on our website. So with that, Nicole, I'm going to let you sort of take off.
Awesome. So as Marit said, I assume many of you are probably somewhat familiar with Kolbe through taking the Kolbe Index for yourself. And if you're not, Kolbe Index is how you naturally take action when you're striving. So when you're trying to do something, so learning, being productive in some way, this is how you would naturally do that with the least amount of stress and the most amount of success. So as you see here, these are myself and Marit's Kolbe Index results. And you might notice that they're very, very different in both the blue line and the green line. And so this really just shows us that Marit and I take action in very different ways.
Yes, we do. I have Kolbe envy, Nicole. When I see yours, I'm like, oh, I wish I had some of that.
You know what? Me too. But luckily, that's why we surround ourselves with people who are different to fill in the gaps so that we can do what we do the best, right? And they can do what they do best. And then we are all working as efficiently as possible and saving lots of time and energy. So Marit jumps right into things, and I will probably plan much more ahead of time and be a little bit less risky with some of my decision making.
That sounds about right. I will tell you, we've talked about it a little bit before, but right after we went into, COVID and went home, I did the Kolbe B, which is what is your job right now? And I was actually having to operate as an 8624, which just about killed me because it was just doing a lot of research and trying to stabilize everything. And I'm somebody who likes to charge forward and take risks and think of new ideas. So actually, Mornings with Marit has been a great source of energy and creativity that I've been able to do without having to do a lot of research. And we come up with these in the instant, right, Matt?
That's right.
Matt's the person who grabs all the ideas and has to execute on them, but it keeps us both busy and energized at the same time.
And that's a really great point. I'm glad you brought that up, that what you were having to do in your job role was very stressful for you, and it was causing a lot of stress, and being able to be free to be yourself is the answer for you. That ties perfectly to what kids are going through in school. Many kids are doing a job as a student that is totally contrary to who they are, and they're in a constant state of stress. So this is all about how can we give them the freedom to be themselves, while still getting what they need to get done, but in a more, enjoyable way for everybody.
Yeah, great.
So like Marit said, I'm with Dynamynd Inc., and we're the sister company to Colby Corp., also founded by Kathy Kolbe. Whereas Colby Corp. Does the business, government, finance kind of branches, we work with youth, education, and wellness clients. And also the research and development that you would later see in Colby Corp. So I'm sure many of you are familiar, like I said, but for those of you who are not, we're kind of talking about the cognitive aspect piece. So you're probably familiar with the other two aspects, the three parts of the mind, and really you and your kids are all three of these things. You're not just one or the other. You have your cognitive piece, and that's really your thinking. That's studied in school, IQ, a math test. School is generally all about, the cognitive part of the mind and learning and progressing that area. We also have, the affective part of the mind, your motivations, desires, your values. So a lot of that is done at home and at school, trying to get kids motivated, trying to get them engaged. Those are some kind of buzzwords. And that's all about dealing with the affective part of the mind. And we also have this third part of the mind that has not been really addressed that often in schools. And that's the cognitive or doing. And this is how you need to take action if free to be yourself. And this is the doing part. And like I said, this is really sort of ignored in schools right now, and isn't really dealt with. And that's kind of what Colby and Dynamynd deal with. So we know that when there are different problems for different parts of the mind, we have solutions, right? If you have a cognitive problem, you're missing a skill, a knowledge, you're behind in your grade level, there's remediation and help for that. You go to tutoring, you are maybe held back, you get extra help from peers or teachers or parents. There's a set system for that in schools. And as a parent, you kind of know what to expect if there's a cognitive deficit happening in your household. When there's an affective, problem, I would say, low motivation, the kid's not engaged in something, there are things that we can do, and that hopefully the teachers and you as parents are, work to kind of get that going. Or, not a match in values or personality issue, your kid doesn't like your teacher, his or her teacher. There are solutions for that of, counseling, discussions. But when there's a cognitive problem, a lot of times, number one, people don't really know what it is, that it's a cognitive problem. And so they try to have solutions that are either cognitive or affective. We're going to talk about this. I'm just going to make them study more, things like that. But really it's a mismatch, like Marit said, having to do something totally against how you naturally would. So we need to figure out how we can align how a kid is naturally going to do something and give them advice that really works for them. so that they're able to really be successful and deal with the problem as a cognitive problem.
You know, Nicole, this reminds me, and this is where I think people can diagnose incorrectly with kids. So as a quick start, um, in school, I always waited till the last minute to cram and get things done, right? And so it was like I didn't like all-nighters, but I would do the last minute. That's where the push was. I was always doing, my class work in the period prior, right? So it's all this last minute stuff. Well, from an outsider's perspective, it was looking like, well, she doesn't care, she's not interested,
Mm-hmm.
she's not engaged, when really I needed that last minute rush to happen for me to have the energy, the capacity. I always say when the magic happened to get it done. And so it's a great example of somebody could say, gee, this person's not interested. In reality, they thrive with the last minute piece of it. And that's probably a good example, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. You have a natural sense of urgency, so having you plan to do it ahead of time is just not going to work for you. And so you have to do it in a way that, to some, like you said, your teachers who are likely Factfinder and follow through, looked like you were disengaged.
Yep.
Another good example is I had students all the time who were in other classes doing very poorly, and they were smart kids. They were motivated kids to do well. And for some reason, they were just doing poorly in the class. And when you looked at it, one of the students had, very short line and follow through. They were not systematized or organized, and their teacher was, really making the class very, very follow through. And they couldn't keep up. So they kind of disengaged themselves from it, even though they were a motivated student in general and very intelligent. They just, I can't do this my way. I can't be a part of it. And so they kind of disengaged, and it looked like maybe that they just didn't know the information or, weren't, didn't care, but it's certainly not the case.
Yeah.
So we're going to briefly talk about the action modes. So as we're going through and talking about Factfinder and follow through and quick start, you have an idea if you're not as familiar with Kolbe. So Factfinder is that red line, and it's how you gather and share information. And we'll go through the continuum of what that means in terms of what your kiddos are doing. Follow through is how you naturally organize and design information and systems. Quick start is how you deal with risk and uncertainty. And implementer is how you're going to handle space intangibles. And we're going to go through examples of this, but essentially in each of these four, you and your kids have a strength in each of these four areas. And it kind of falls on a continuum between 1 and 10. And for simplicity's sake, we break it up into 3 areas for each of these. And these are our 12 strengths. And remember, all of this is when you are striving, right? So this is how you naturally take action when you're striving. You still have to be motivated to do something. It's actually when you're doing something. When you're sitting on the couch doing nothing or taking a break, this isn't necessarily where this comes into play, right? So this is reliable. Your result, Marit, as you were talking about when you were a kid studying, you did the exact same thing as you did as a kid as you do now, because your result does not change.
No.
We just finished a 20-year retest reliability study, and we see that, in fact, statistically, your results will not change even over 20 years. So presumably your whole life.
Yep.
So when you have your kids kind of complete an assessment to figure out their strengths, or when you've taken the Kolbe Index yourself, you can really count on that. You know that this is something that you shouldn't want to change about a person, and you really can't change them. So if Marit, I would have told you, let's just put you in a class where we teach you how to organize and use a binder, and we're going to work on this really hard, and you're going to get it someday. You would have, maybe done it for a week or something, and then you would have.
It'd have been fun to think about it as an idea, and then you'd be like, okay, well, I'm not staying with that. And, it's interesting, yeah. Nicole, I kind of talk about Kolbe is like oxygen for me. I have to have it when I work with people. If I go and work with anybody, if I don't know their MO, I could absolutely be coaching them against their grain and putting them in a really frustrating, burned out situation. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with kids. I was able to get some sense of my son back when he was 4, when I first got certified. And back then you didn't have the kids test at that
Mm-hmm.
point, but you just become aware of what your cues you're looking for. And I remember at one time, I was like, Alex, it's time for bed. Alex, it's time for bed. And he would ignore me, and I thought he was ignoring me. And as soon as I got done with my Kolbe certification, my whole world blew up, and your filters changed, and I realized he was just parking the cars before he went to bed. He
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure everything was in order so it wasn't chaos, where I would never have never ever put everything together. I could walk away from something being a disaster. So it is great from a perspective as a parent to start to watch those cues, and how do you help your kid from a perspective of being energized in their work and what they're doing as opposed to exhausted.
Absolutely. And so these are, like I said, each of you would have a strength in the Factfinder, follow through, quick start, and implementer, and it's not going to change. So don't try and change it. Let's embrace it and figure out how to help suggest, tips and tricks so that they're going to be successful in environments maybe where it would be overall kind of stressful. So let's look at that Factfinder first. And what we're seeing is at the bottom, we have researching. These are those kids who are naturally going to prioritize, dig into the details, need a lot of information before they get started on something. And again, this is when you're motivated. So it's not like they would need information about every single thing in their life. This is if they care about it, right? So if they care to do something about it, they're going to need information to move forward. These are the kids in class and now at home, when they're virtually with you, who are going to ask a lot of questions before they get started. And they need that opportunity to do some research or consult an expert or do those things before they're really able to, what it looks like to you, take action. But for them, that is kind of the process for them. We have those kids on the other end, the simplifiers, who naturally do not need a lot of information to get started. In fact, they will get started without listening to all the instructions. And then they will later realize when they hit a stopping point that they need more information. So they get information as needed, and it's usually bullet pointed information, not long paragraphs that they're going to read through. They're not going to open attachments. These are kids who are going to, skim books. And that's okay. In school, we tell our kids, you need to read every single word of this chapter. For those simplifiers, what is the most important information? Is it bolded? Is it highlighted? How can you skim to get the essence and then get more information as needed, right? Because if they read, a whole page of something necessarily, they're not necessarily going to retain it as well as if they would have gotten those key bullet points, right? And then those kiddos in the middle who explain, they're able to kind of bridge the gap between both of those. They can take something that's really long and verbose and kind of summarize it and pare it down a lot easier. Those are kids who are going to excel when they're given a writing assignment to a specific length, or, okay, you need to fill this section and I know that, so I can kind of write to that section. They're not going to write more than that. And they'll kind of do exactly what's asked for that. They can also take information that's really long and kind of pare it down to give to those simplifiers. So those are kind of the three zones in that Factfinder, and kind of what you would expect that kid to be able to do. And then just thinking about virtual and working, doing school from home, it can be difficult for those simplifiers who maybe are told, because it's a virtual environment a lot of times right now, you're not having necessarily that interaction with your teacher or peers all day long, right? It's like an hour or two a day. I don't know if Matt, that's what you're seeing with kind of is going to happen with your son, but in a lot of places in our area, we see that, you're really interacting with the teacher just a couple hours of the day, and then you're really more independent learning the other hours, right?
I mean, that's the thing. We think that's how it's going to work. We're still waiting to hear from our school district exactly how it's going to work, but that seems to be, what the process is going to be. Well, he'll be with a teacher maybe an hour or two a day, but then they're just kind of off on their own doing their little assignments and projects, and they just have to like check in every once in a while. So yeah.
Yeah, and I could see issues for that for both the simplifiers and the researchers. The explainers are going to have an easier time just accommodating that kind of that kind of information, getting that information from the teacher. But for the simplifiers, a lot of times they, like I said, don't really listen to the instructions. They'll just jump in. And if they're kind of starting and then they can't ask somebody later when they really need the information, that can be difficult. So really having them being able to message the teacher when they need that, and not having the teacher say, I told you those instructions 2 times, right? Mm-hmm. Or having a friend that they can call in their class to clarify the instructions or the expectations is going to be really helpful. On that other end, those researchers do need information. So if they're relying on their teacher to be their expert and they don't have access to their teacher all day long, they might be starting to ask you a bunch of questions about stuff that maybe you don't have time to answer or you just don't know about. So trying to help them find resources, maybe it's the teacher, maybe it's another kid in the class, maybe it's, a book or online, or they can reference to get more information as needed. Because like I said, they need a lot of information to get started. And if they don't have a way to ask those questions or get that information themselves, then they're just not going to start. Right? So those are kind of some tips that I would recommend, especially for this virtual environment. So follow through is the blue line, and that is how we organize and share, organize and design. At the bottom, we have planning, and these are people who are going to naturally systematize and organize in a stepwise process. They are not going to be random. Generally, they are going to do things in order, in a sequence. So things like having a natural flow of the day is really important for them. Having consistency is very important for them. And being able to plan and schedule some of their own time is very important for them. These are students who are going to seem, very, very organized. They're generally going to do things in the same kind of way. For example, they would be fine with formatting their papers all in the same way, or they always turn in their work and it looks pretty neat and tidy. Those are going to be those kids. They also need a structured environment. And again, we'll talk about that can be kind of difficult right now because there is not a totally structured environment for education, On the other end, the shortcutting, those are kids who are just so easily adaptable. They are not going to follow, they're organized, but in their own way. They're not going to follow a system or sequence necessarily. They're going to find shortcuts and kind of a plan A, plan B, plan C kind of thing, and move very, be very agile in their movements between those. They don't need a set structure. In fact, they thrive on having things kind of, be a little bit more chaotic in that way. So these are students.
Would you say, Nicole, with kids like that, having an environment that they know this is what needs to get done during the day, but it doesn't have to be done in a specific order, so they can bounce around, is going to be much more energizing than here's the schedule all day long that you need to follow.
Absolutely. Yeah. So those planning students are the ones that would need a schedule. Okay, we always do math at this time. I always then check my reading folder at this time. I always then check in with my teacher at this time. That will work for those planning students. And that's kind of how a natural, normal educational day is at school, is kind of structured that way. And it's actually even better for them now, because if they're able to plan that for themselves, that's even better, right? And not have the school plan it for them. Like you said, I can do my own work at my own time. For those shortcutting students, they're not going to do things in the same order, and the freedom to be able to kind of pick and choose at different times. And as long as they get everything done they're supposed to get done, that's going to be great for them. Again, and also not having to necessarily, like have a binder that's specific that schools check. I don't know if you guys have this, but we have things that Teachers are very specific about, okay, we all have to put this in our binder at the exact same place. Those kids who naturally shortcut are not going to stick with that very long. They need a more, a different organizational system that's a little bit simpler, that they're just going to, papers in, papers out kind of thing. A really elaborate organizational plan is not going to work for them at all. And like you said, having the freedom to kind of jump around to different subjects, as long as they get everything done, it's going to be wonderful for them right now.
Can I just add, when my son took it and he got his score, he saw, that he was low in certain things like quick start. And he thought because he had a low number, that was maybe, like a weakness. But I had to explain to him, there's no like high score, low score. There's like benefits also of having a low quick start. You just have to, kind of look at it a different way. And it's a different, different strategies you can use.
That's a really great point. And just because you have a lower number does not mean you have any worse result. These are all perfect results. And as long as you're acting free to be yourself, it's perfect for you, right? If you're trying to do something different, then that's where it kind of is not perfect for you, right? But we all have strengths, and all 12 of these are strengths. None of them are weaknesses. In certain situations, like in a school environment or some work environments, they're not necessarily taken advantage of or appreciated as they should be. Mm-hmm. And that's where we start feeling like they might be weaknesses when they're really not. And that's a great point. That shortcutter kid, I guarantee often feels like what they do, which is being really agile and able to switch gears and be very interruptible, and just drop a task, doesn't have to be done with it, and is able to move on at the drop of a hat. That's a real strength. And in many jobs and many organizations and family, and even in the school environment, that can be a real strength, and it's not appreciated. If you have a fire drill and you have to stop in the middle of a test or a class or, something they're doing, those shortcutting kids are like, oh yeah, I can stop this right now and go to do a fire drill.
Actually, they're glad to have the fire drill. They're like, we can leave.
That break, right? They need to be doing different things. They need to be multitasking and doing lots of different things at once to be able to switch back and forth. But those kids who are natural planners, oh my, this is an interruption. I'm not able to finish what I'm doing. This wasn't supposed to happen. That's going to be that kind of interruption that happens in life and in school sometimes, is tougher for them. So having a shortcutting ability is not appreciated, but it definitely should be. And it's not that we should try to change those kids to be more organized. Let's figure out how we can use their strengths in the classroom and now at home for you, but still have them be able to kind of get done what they need to get done, right? And then those kids in the middle are really able to adapt and, be kind of maintain a system. So they're the kind of teacher dream, because a teacher will have a system or a plan for the classroom, and they can adjust based on, there's 7 different teachers that they have. They can do whatever each teacher wants. They turn in they go with the flow in terms of plan. And that's really, someone that would kind of be under the radar and do great as far as organizing and designing. In the quick start, those innovator kids like Marit, those are kids who are naturally just going to go for it and experiment and not be bothered, and in fact be energized by this, uncertainty that's happening. It might be a little bit affectively scary at first, but with things going on in the pandemic, not knowing if you're going back to school or in person or not, that's not going to faze these kids quite as much. In fact, it's kind of exciting, like day to day, not knowing what you're going to do and having something kind of thrown at you that you deal with, right? That's probably what you live for. Hey. And in fact, you create some of that chaos for others.
Look, Matt, don't shake your head that hard on that. No.
And so this type of environment is not as, when they're not sure kind of what's happening, this uncertainty is not as, terrifying for those kids, right? On the other end, we have these stabilizers who naturally kind of stick with the status quo and deal with risk and uncertainty very differently, meaning they minimize that risk and uncertainty. So not knowing, what they're going to be doing in class, not knowing if they're even going to go back in person, if they're going to be at home, that's very stressful for some of those kids. And Matt, your son, is in that stabilizing. Is it kind of stressful for him to be dealing with all this uncertainty
Yeah.
that's going on right now?
Yeah, I think it's caused a lot of anxiety, especially as, school was supposed to start this week and now it's been pushed back 4 weeks, and he just doesn't like those surprises. Like, he always wants to have a plan. He wants to know what's going to happen. Um, he's one of those kids that I think most teachers love because he does, come prepared. He has a plan for everything, follows through with his work. But when something surprises him, it kind of throws him off balance and, really is impacting him as school, is closer, we think.
Yeah, and it's going to be really important for those kids to make sure to remind them of things that are staying the same and staying consistent. I certainly wouldn't tell a student or a kid that I was consulting with who was a natural stabilizer, oh, guess what? You're going to have all this new stuff and it's going to be great and exciting. Like I would tell Marit, it's brand new. No one's ever done it before. It's amazing. That's what I would tell you. I certainly wouldn't tell Matt's son that. I would say, you know what? You're still going to be with your same class. There's still going to be 30 of you. You're going to be able to still see your teacher and talk to her every day. You could choose to do your work in the same place at home every day if you'd like.
Mm-hmm.
I would remind, you're still going to be in middle school or 7th grade or whatever it is. You're still going to be taking these classes. These are the things that I would remind him of to decrease some of that anxiety and stress caused by that uncertainty. There are a lot of things uncertain, but I would definitely not talk about those. I wouldn't talk about how exciting or different it's going to be. I would talk about how, it's still going to be this way.
Yeah.
And some control that he's going to be able to have over the plan because he also is a highly accommodating follow through.
Yeah, and we've made sure, to have like a space just for him, and we've helped him set that up, and he's, gotten new posters and made like a little area that he knows is just his workplace. And also just doing little things, like he always gets excited about buying a new backpack. So even though he's not going back to school in person, I'm still like, okay, pick out your backpack and, just do some of those little things as a parent that make it still seem like it's a normal going back to school.
Absolutely. That's great. So exactly those types of things are what I would do for your son. And then getting in, and then those kids in the middle are able to adapt to change and uncertainty. If something happens, they're not going to initiate the change. They're not going to go for something new, but if a peer or a parent suggests some change, they'll kind of go with it. That's not difficult for them. And then those kids who are implementers. So on the bottom, we have, again, this is dealing with space intangibles. So on the bottom, constructing, these are kids who are going to naturally need demonstration to do the demonstration themselves and see it in the physical world. And this can be very difficult for them if they're, doing things virtually. Again, you're not in a space where you can physically hold the model. I taught science, like I said, and I would have physical models for almost everything that I could, because even if it was, obviously not a proportion, because I had students who naturally were constructors and they needed in the here and now that physicality demonstration to see what that really meant, and it helped them learn. And so when you're at this virtual environment, that can be very difficult because you're both not seeing anybody else in person, but you're also not being able to touch and hold and do things yourselves and physically manipulate. So finding ways to do that for those kids is going to be really important, especially in a virtual environment. So Matt, like you said, your son highly accommodates in this area and is kind of more towards the constructing side. So having a space that he was able to pick out, making sure it's comfortable for him, it has the things he needs, quality materials, a pen, a pencil, not kind of a desk that is sturdy, not something that's kind of, slapped together last minute. Being by a window, natural light, maybe he's able to go outside for certain periods of the day to do work outside in nature and, feel kind of the senses. And that's going to be important for him because he's not going to be able to do that just sitting in a chair. So having some manipulatives for him, having him kick his leg, something under his desk where he could kick it, like a bouncy thing, or having something in his hands that he can manipulate that, aren't going to be shown on video. Those are not distractions for someone who is a natural constructor. Those are things that are actually going to help them focus more, right?
Yeah, he might be kicking his 3-year-old brother under the table, actually.
Hopefully he accommodates in a lot of different modes.
Yeah.
And then those kids on the other end who envision, those are going to be kids who are not kind of stuck in the here and now, and they can kind of be more abstract with their thoughts, and are not needing that sense of demonstration. In fact, they thrive when there's not kind of a 3D answer for things and can imagine different possibilities. So being in a virtual environment is not going to be as taxing for them at all, you know. And then those kids in the middle who restore, those are going to be kids who kind of can accommodate different things, and they kind of throw things together. You know, they don't need necessarily quality materials. They can fix something if it's broken, and they can kind of deal with sitting in place for a while. They can deal with kind of walking around. They don't necessarily need that structure, that environment to be, anything physical or demonstration. They can kind of go in between. So those are kind of the 12 strengths and what you would see in a student, and some kind of pitfalls that we're going to maybe fall into for some students during this, pandemic craziness, going back to school. I don't know if you see any questions coming in, Matt.
No, not at the moment.
Okay. Feel
Great.
free.
And I think you've got some nice examples here too to actually walk through, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So let's look at like a picture of somebody. I know one of them is going to be Matt's son, and maybe I think hopefully if you're already recognizing characteristics about your kids as we're talking about this. Oh yeah, my son does that, or my child does that. So I know we're going to also make sure that everybody knows how they can go find those results as well, so you're not guessing.
Absolutely. So we definitely don't want to guess, because oftentimes as parents, we kind of let the affect to get in the way, and we see ourselves in our kids. And I'll show you later that that's not necessarily the case. So yes, Charlie, that is your son, Matt. And as we kind of talked about, he's going to be that kid who's going to naturally research and dig into the details, but then very quickly need to put that into a plan of action. He's kind of a detailed planner, and so having a structured, prioritized list of what he's going to be doing for that day is going to be really important for him. So while he's at home learning, and something that you as a parent can help with. And by the way, we're giving these tips and tricks so that you're not having to stand over your kid's shoulder and making, do this, you can kind of step back and allow them to advocate for their own needs, because if they're doing it in a way that's natural for them, they're going to be more successful. And you're not going to have to bang your head against a wall to try and get them to do different things, right? So if you empower your son to kind of stick with the same schedule every day and mark off and list the priorities he has for the day, right? I'm going to write a list of my top 3 or everything I need to do today. Let him prioritize it. Let him know what he's going to be able to do first and second, and in the order he's going to do it. That's going to be really important for him.
Yeah.
Allow him to, have time maybe either with on video, or maybe 30 minutes of your day where he can physically show you what he's doing. You don't have to allow that all day long. That's not realistic if you're a working parent, right? Or even not, even if you're a stay-at-home parent who's, trying to do things at home, you're not going to be able to just sit there necessarily next to your kid all day and, learn with them and, do their schoolwork.
You better not, Matt. You've got a job.
You're going to, but say, okay, between this time and this time, show me whatever you want. Show me what you've been doing. Let's do a demonstration, or, let's build something together that kind of shows what you're talking, the model you're talking about, or provide them with materials. If he's doing math, that he can physically count things. Those are going to be important for him, and he can be then doing that on his own. And again, like we talked about, making sure that he's aware of the things that are going to stay constant and the same, kind of limiting those surprises for him. What can he expect? These are the things you can expect today, or these are the things you can expect this week. So maybe making sure his teacher provides him with kind of the schedule for the week. That can be very important. He knows what to expect. I know my homework is due this day. I know I have a test this day. It limits those surprises and that uncertainty, and allows him to fit it into his prioritized plan. And that's going to help him be, immensely more successful and less stressed.
Yeah. The other thing I'll add is he's really into sports, basketball and baseball. So it's been really hard for him because he hasn't been able to do that right now. He can't be on the team, or they can't go play their tournaments or whatever. So we've made sure that he still schedules out certain times of the day when it's cooler, that he can, practice his basketball drills. And he even has those like written out on a whiteboard and he'll mark it off when he finishes it. So just like little things, we're trying to get him prepared to keep on doing that and to still have time to do that even when school starts, and it's been really important for him just to keep that up.
That's a really great point. It doesn't always have to be about, your schoolwork. Let's provide opportunities, like you said, for striving in different ways that's going to help, keep that kid in their zone and working and striving at high levels, right? So that's a really good point. If your kid is an implementer but doesn't necessarily like sports, maybe they help cook lunch or dinner. That would be honestly a really good task for your son, because has the details and he has the plan. He could follow a recipe really well. He would be an amazing cook. I would let him cook for
he loves doing that too.
So something like that, allowing them to kind of be in charge of a project of cleaning up something or organizing something in the house, something that can use their skills. So it might not be being taken advantage of in the school environment, but let's allow them for something outside of the school environment to use that energy. That's a great point. Another example, and I picked a few different types of MOs that we're going to deal with. This child's Allie. She is naturally not going to deal with the details. She is naturally going to simplify, and she will put something into a system, but only after she's ideated. She's going to come up with ideas and experiment and do something, and then she'll kind of put it into a plan, and more of like a loose plan of what she's going to do. But she also needs that physicality. So when I'm talking to a student like Allie, the tips that I would give her for this crazy pandemic world that we're living in when she's at home is find times that you can talk with somebody. It might not be your teacher online. It might not be the students while you're naturally in class, because they're going to be more verbal. They're naturally going to need to talk things out and brainstorm and ideate, and then kind of put that into an organized system. I have all these ideas, and then I kind of write them down and chunk them into these 3 categories. She's not going to necessarily be able to do that. And brainstorming is really helpful when you have another person. So maybe make sure you have a friend in the classroom, even if it's virtual, that you can hop on a Zoom call with or hop on the phone with. And because she has a 6 and implementer, I would really suggest it be a hop on a Zoom call so you can see them face to face and read that body language. That child is going to need to have time. And if they're not able to do that with another student, you as a parent might need to carve out maybe 30 minutes or 15 minutes where they can ask what if questions. They can ask different questions and just kind of ideate and brainstorm different possibilities and ideas for a paper they have to write, something like that. And maybe because of the 6 and implementer, I would suggest you guys take a walk while that happens. And it's not necessarily structured and sitting in a desk. So a lot of this is, again, like I said, you're not having to babysit your kid at home, making sure they do all these different things, but allowing them the freedom to do it themselves, and then maybe providing either another resource, a friend, a teacher, or yourself for a short time during the day to make yourself available to kind of help facilitate moving forward. Because again, with the 7 and Quick Start, it's going to be hard for her to move forward until she's brainstormed some options. And that can be, Marit, you brainstorm with other people.
I was just thinking, for me, that's one of the things I've missed. Matt and Cindy, they know when I'm starting to come up with ideas, we'll pull a group of people together with a whiteboard and just play with stuff for a while, and then I get it organized. And so having to do it on my own at times, it's not as fun. I can do it, it's just not as much fun. And so we use different techniques now to allow for that. So yeah, those quick starts, they really do need to, they think out loud. So they have to, it doesn't happen in their brain. They're not going to write it down. They need to be able to interact and brainstorm and come up with options, and then it'll distill itself pretty quickly after that.
And then with her Factfinder, she's a 2 in Factfinder, not having to kind of defend all of her ideas. That's going to be important. Well, why do you think that? Or defend your argument on this. No, this is just what I think because I think it. This is my idea. Let's try it out. I don't need all the evidence that it's going to work ahead of time. And again, suggesting it can be difficult if the teacher is asking the student to, read this whole book, or read this whole paper, because they're doing independent work and it's less kind of like conversational. I would suggest to Allie to make sure you skim and you really just hit the bullet points, and you have your friend give you the bottom, have your friend read it and give you the bottom line. Don't tell your teacher. So that's kind of what I would tell this student, Allie. Taylor, this is actually my brother's MO. And as a student, I have firsthand knowledge of kind of the struggles he went through, and kind of in the framework of this pandemic, I'm going to talk about kind of some of the stress of this as well. It's very similar to Allie in that quick start and implementer. So still needing to brainstorm and physical. So if you could, again, have that face-to-face interaction somehow, if not in person because of what's going on, have it a video chat instead of being on the phone, or a parent or another sibling maybe can talk to them and brainstorm and do it in a more physical way, making sure that they have a comfortable environment, or are able to, again, walk outside or do some of their work just like in the grass, is going to be really important for them. With his 3 and follow through, he's really adaptable. He doesn't have to be in the same place every day. He doesn't have to follow a schedule. It's, it's not important for him to like have a very structured and consistent, plan for anything. And with this quick start, it's no big deal if things pop up out of the blue, right? Oh, school is canceled today. Great. Or school is back on today. Oh, great. The plan changed. It's no big deal. Those are all things that don't bother him. But in school, those are the kids who are going to forget to put their name on the paper, or did all the work and just didn't turn it in. They're not going to keep a organized binder or folder of something. They're going to need to, just kind of shove it in a folder and find the paper that works for them. They are the ones who, if you are a parent and you're like, oh, you have to put everything away in a drawer, it might as well be gone to them. They're not going to know it. They need piles in their rooms where they know what's going on. So an environment kind of at home can be nice because they're able to a little bit more freedom of that, but and they will need reminders to turn things in. They're going to need reminders to turn their stuff in electronically. They're going to need reminders. And whether that's electronic reminders, like as a parent, you help your child set up different, like alerts on your phone, or that child buddies up with somebody in their class. Like when you turn something in, make sure I turn it in too. So that they can help each other out with that. That's going to be really, really important. But I would say that the extreme structure that normal school is very difficult for an MO like this. This is going to be the MO that it's going to be the most difficult on, because you don't naturally research a lot, where you're getting all the details. So you just happen to know everything because that's tested, because a lot of the tests are Factfinder tests, and you've read and you've researched and you know all of that. You're also not extremely organized in the traditional sense. So you're not praised for your turning things in on time and things like that. And then you also are kind of asking questions all over the place and fidgeting and moving around and needing to get up all the time. So being at home can be you can create a conducive environment for that. And that's going to be really lucky.
Yeah, it's funny. My dad's MO is very similar to Taylor's, and he's 75 now. He still has nightmares about school because it was so rigid and so structured, and it really, burnt him out. And
it's a stressful, it's a very, very stressful environment. When we're talking about, your Colby Index and what your job needs, it is going to be more like Charlie for most students. Maybe less implementer would be ideal for a normal school environment. But then if everybody's trying to act like that, only a very small percent of the population has an MO like that. So we're really putting everyone else in a lot of stress. So these are kids who hate school, hate going to school, and only would maybe go for the social interaction, but they often are not going to be top of their class, even if they're so smart and they care a lot.
Yep.
Right.
Great. Good. I think we've got about 10 or 15 minutes left, so we'll
Okay.
move through so people
Yeah.
know what they can do next, and we'll give them a couple more examples.
Yeah, so very quickly, we have the student aptitude quiz, which is very similar to the Kolbe Index, but it's geared towards students. The questions and the results are all about how you can be successful in school. You still get your 4 numbers, so you'll be able to see what we're talking about and compare it to your own Kolbe Index as well. And it's for ages 10 and older. And you can take it even up to about undergraduate college. And you can go to studentaptitude.com to get that. If you're interested, and there's different add-ons for taking tests and dealing with stress and things like that. So different reports.
Great.
If your child is younger than 10, Matt, listen up. If I can get, we have the Brainiac Natural Abilities Assessment, and this is for anyone 3 years and older. This is a nonverbal assessment, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a young kid. We've actually worked with students who have special needs who are unable to take a written assessment. So this is totally nonverbal. We mail you a kit of kind of junk, and we have instructions for some of you. It's very similar to a glop shop, but it's an individualized assessment. We mail you something with very brief instructions. You record a video, you send it back to us, and we actually score it. 2 of us in-house score it and then send you a result. Again, you get your 4 numbers. The report is written mostly to the parents. To kind of what are some tips and tricks that I can do to help my kids. So there are options for you, even if your kid cannot take an assessment online.
So Nicole, that first one for 10 or 11 and up, that's what, $17? Is that what that is?
Yes.
Okay, so, and then how much is the Brainiac one?
The Brainiac is $250.
Okay.
Which is a little steeper, but we score it in-house, and Kathy actually personally scores it with another person of our team and
nice.
Gives those results to parents. So yeah, sorry, that was the 10 plus, that's $17 and $5 for each add-on you'd like.
Great.
So feel free to email, and you can email me directly. I have my email at the end also if you're interested in Brainiac or any of the things that are listed here. So let's talk about giving advice to your kid, right? You're helping them try to be successful in school. And as we know right here, parents and children are different. There's no genetic link. So just as teachers try and give advice to students that would work for them and not necessarily work for the student, we do that as parents all the time. And Matt, you and your son, Charlie, are similar in a couple of different ways, but you're very different in a few. So the advice or things that worked for you in school are not necessarily going to work for your son. So kind of give us a take on that.
Yeah, so really seeing these results for him weren't a surprise. It just verified a lot of things. The fact that we're both Factfinders didn't surprise me at all, but I am a much quick start, if that makes sense. I like Marit, I don't mind like something new every day, or just kind of reacting to different situations. He, of course, as we talked about, is very different. So I know, and I've been lucky because he knows this about himself too, that if he, he'll get up and he'll make a schedule for what he wants to accomplish that day. And he likes actually just seeing it checked off, like I'm going to use this 30 minutes to practice basketball. I'm going to use this 30 minutes to even like research something. I saw a list he created where he was like, actually, this is funny. He wants to start a lawn mowing business next year when he's a little older, but he's already like doing research on lawnmowers and stuff like that. He's making like a list. Like I wouldn't do that. I would do the fact finding, but I would just keep it in my head. He will actually take that information, write it down, implement it, and he'll use it as support and background. I'm very different. We'll all have the information, but I won't spit it out a lot of times until it's like that time when somebody needs it right then and there.
When there's that sense of urgency, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of how that plays out, and the difference between both of us. And it's more just recognizing like, oh, he has to do this. Like he's like my mom in this way. Like he has to like plan things out. He has to know what's going to happen, where I'm, it doesn't bother me as much.
Awesome. Another example, I know we have Marit, you and your son.
Yeah, very different.
Alex. You guys
Luckily,
are very different,
yeah,
especially in quick start. So I can imagine you just coming up with ideas. We're going to do this, 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 and this, and this, and this. And he's like, whoa, slam on the brakes.
yeah. No, it's interesting because there's two I guess stories that come to mind for me. One is he made a hockey team and had to move and had to make a decision within, like 2 days that I made this team and I've got to move away, and he was 14. And it's the worst behavior I've ever seen from me. He's just completely stressed out. And going back and looking at this very quickly thereafter, what we did to him was say, just accept it, and then we've got the summer to plan it and do the research. And if you decide you're not comfortable at that point, we'll back out. It's fine. And that just calmed him down completely. And
Took the pressure off and the
it took
sense
the
of
pressure off,
urgency.
and he was fine with it as soon as he knew that he had the time to plan, that this decision wasn't the end all be all. And this was something he wanted to do since he was 5. So it was his dream that was about to happen, but that put him in a total state of strain. So what we do with him is we talk about contingency plans. Okay, if this happens, what are the scenarios? And for college right now, he's going to be working from home, doing school from home. And so we did this summer was sort of say, okay, if you go back, this is what it could look like. If you stay at home, this is what it could look like. And so then no matter what has happened, he's already worked through all the
Prepared.
scenarios and feels much more comfortable about, okay, it's not a brand new thing because we already did the research and laid that out.
That's
So
awesome. And the other thing I want to just mention is we need to make sure you as a parent are able to totally stay in your game while your child's able to stay in theirs. And you're helping them be who they are.
Yep.
But does that mean you have to do things exactly cater to them in every single aspect? And the answer is no. There's no possible way. To relieve the stress of your child, we don't want to totally stress you out and make sure that you aren't working in your game. So Marit, I'm sure you do a lot of the ideating and like here are things we can do, and your son helps you do the research and
plans it. He does all the planning for us. Yep,
exactly.
Absolutely.
So
he's planned his birthday party since he was 5.
Exactly.
We brainstorm ideas, and then he does the research and he plans it and he invites everyone. And if it were me, it would be like, oh, it's your birthday today. Let's collect some people and do something.
And
which
so
would look like I didn't care. Yeah.
But exactly, and that's not affectively the truth, right? You obviously love your son. So making sure that we're all able to be ourselves, but then kind of assign different tasks to people, as even the young kids can do that. Like you said, they've been planning his birthday party for a long time. Give them the freedom to do that, and they'll be very successful.
So I'm a little worried this might cut us off right at 11. And so maybe what we'll do is wrap up with folks. I know we're not quite complete with this, but if people have questions, they can get back with us. But I think sometimes when we have it set for a specific time, it actually stops. And I don't want it to be an awkward moment here.
Let me put my, I'm sorry. Let me put my email. It's going to pull up in just a second.
Great. And if you are interested in an A, you can email me as well at mpete@iit.org or respond to the emails that go out. If you're looking for the kids' resources, please reach out to Nicole. Nicole, thank you so much for your time. That was so much information.
Yeah. I know. I'm so sorry. If you have any questions about, your own situation, we do consulting and other things. Ask me questions about your own specific instances, and we can kind of talk about that.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you, Matt, for sharing your story with your kid, and hopefully this has been helpful for you already going through this process. And I encourage anybody to do it, to engage, that you get some nice resources as a parent, and this will also be available if you want to go back and listen to it again. So have a wonderful day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.